Hello, welcome to the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione. We're up in the turret of pleasure here, talking music as always. I'm your host, Zipp Gunn. I'm the Lord Chamberlain of the Enchanted Kingdom. And we're going to embark on Volume 4 of my own personal musical journey. Parts 1, 2, and 3. Luckily, a lot of it has been very neat and tidy. My first big thing was the Beatles. Then the Stones was number 2. Then I discovered the Who. All right, so far so good. Takes me up to about 1969. And there was other stuff in those 3 bands, but they were the dominant. They were my favorite bands for those periods of time. But then along came something that really changed it up for me. 1969, I was 10. And that might seem like I'm just a little kid, but I've been buying records since I was about 3 and listening to the radio and getting it into rock and roll. So I was a pretty advanced 10-year-old. And I'm not sure, I haven't researched it, but about 1969 was when FM radio came along. And FM radio was completely different at the outset than AM radio. Almost nothing to do with each other. AM radio was the hit parade, the jocks, and AM radio I thought was still pretty good. The one that I followed was CKLG in Vancouver, and that was because you could get it here in Victoria, and it had a Canadian ring to it. There was a bit more. It wasn't so much as a regionalized playlist as most American stations were. It was a little bit of everything. I remember Paul Maurier's "Love Is Blue" was on the Canadian charts way back in the day, and that seemed perfectly normal to have this easy listening song in with the Yardbirds. And but when FM radio came along, basically it was like, you can do whatever you want. And since 1969, psychedelia was very well entrenched. We had some bands doing long songs, which of course would never get played on AM radio. If they did, they were, edited down to, bad versions. Light My Fire. I remember when Light My Fire first broke, they did play the long version on AM radio briefly. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute, everybody likes this. So then Elektra did that edit, and from that point on, you never heard the long version on AM radio, but you started hearing it on FM radio, in addition to the end and when the music's over and all the long songs, especially FM radio that ran late into the night. They could do anything they wanted. And this is me. Remember, I'm a weirdo. I've always been a weirdo, and as a kid, weird was cool. And, Revolution number 9. That was cool, I thought. And so when I got a little AM, FM radio, it was a pretty good one, had good sound. And I could pick up CKLG FM. And this embarked me on a whole new universe of things. And one of the things I discovered pretty quick was jazz. It's particularly kind of avant-garde jazz, which I had no idea it existed. Because nobody in my family had any interest in jazz, and it wasn't on AM radio at all, really. But on FM radio, they would play jazz and sort of the emerging sort of jazz fusion. They'd play Miles Davis. They'd play Weather Report. This is a little bit later. But in '69, the band that kind of took off for me, there was actually 2. But the one that influenced me far more than the other was Chicago, of all bands. And it was because they were technically, in my weird 10-year-old world, they were a jazz band. And if you listen to their first album, it's kind of a jazz album. In sort of the same way that Diana Krall makes a jazz album. But theirs actually had jazz in it. And it had pop songs, some terrific pop singles on it. It had a great cover of a Spencer Davis song, which is probably is better than the Spencer Davis version. There's a complete guitar freak out that starts off one of the sides, which I always thought was the coolest thing in the universe because, it was just him wanking with a Stratocaster, making like freeform guitar noise. And then there was the side 4 of the first record, which was Jimmy Hancock doing his jazz suite. So it's all pretty, it wasn't super commercial, a lot of it. And I kind of dug it, and I'd never heard anything like this before. And very quickly with them was Blood, Sweat, and Tears, who I liked their second record a lot. But Chicago was my band, and I got into Terry Cass's guitar playing, and they're all good players, real solid craftsmen. I really liked the idea that everybody in the band wrote songs, and that over the course of the band's career, everybody had a hit, it seemed. So, when their first record came out in 1969, they were a real breath of fresh air in my world because they had horns. I'd never really listened much to horns, and they had improvisations, and they had, it was jazz, like jazz, and they were local bands. There was band Chilliwack. Their first record is kind of got these jazz moments in them. And so, but I also heard some real jazz thanks to FM radio. So I heard Charlie Hayden Liberation Music Orchestra record on Impulse. And I also heard, and this was through another connection, I heard Karma by Pharoah Sanders and really thought it was cool. Never owned a copy of it until literally 10 years ago. And I found a record by Clark Hutchinson called A=MH2, I think it is. They were in an 8-track studio, 2 guys, good guitar player, and sort of a multi-instrumentalist, doing these raga guitar improvs. And all this sort of jazzy stuff. I started to really get into jazz, and I started to quickly realize that, okay, for example, I thought Impulse is good stuff. And I learned all of this because in about 69 or 70, I should have researched this, but I don't know where I'll look. They opened a record store in Victoria, BC, in the Law Chambers. The place was called Joyful Sound, and it was, every town probably had one of these. It was the hippie record store, and it was in this building. You had to go up a bunch of stairs, and it was sort of at the top of the stairs. And it was run by a real nice guy who was really hippie looking to me. And he had little John Lennon glasses, and he wore sort of kind of interesting clothing. And his wife made interesting clothing, and they ran a record store. And I guess I was about 10 or 11. And I used to go downtown with my parents during summer holiday. They just hang out downtown. So I would hang out at this record store. They didn't mind. I didn't make a real nuisance out of myself. And I even bought the odd record off of them. So they thought it was cool, and I got to know these people quite well. Got to hear a lot of interesting music, including Pharoah Sanders, and actually including, I think, Clark Hutchinson too. I think I bought it from them because they let me buy it. A used record, which was unheard of in those days. And very nice people. So I got to hear things like John Simon's first album, which is a great record that I remember fondly. And I think I bought my first Captain Beefheart record from these folks. And I used to hang out. I'd go there maybe a couple of times a week. And in the morning when there was nobody there. And then one day, I went in, and there was a completely different fella behind the counter. And looked like a lumberjack, big guy with a beard. And he was friendly, and I was like, oh, so-and-so here. I don't remember their names. He goes, no, we're under new management, or forget how he put it. I'm the new owner, but very friendly. And I said, oh, that's cool. And he was like, yeah, no, it's cool. I just, I haven't done it. I'm going to see what it's like. And he befriended me pretty quickly, sort of picked up where I left off with the store. And after a while, I'd go in, and I always go in slow. And he gave me all the promo stuff that he would get. Some of it was just amazing stuff. I wish I kept it. And then every once once in a while, he started saying, "Hey, would you just sort of mind the store? Well, I got to go out for like 10 minutes. This would be 11 o'clock in the morning." I'd be, "Sure, okay. What if somebody wants to buy something?" As well, just put them off till I get back. I won't be long. And so I did this. So this was the first time I'd ever worked in a record store. And I think I actually did end up selling a record or two. But I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, 11 years old. And, and of course, weird people shopped at the store, like hippies. So people would come in and they, "Hey, man." But I also got to play some cool records. And so Chicago was my band, kind of. Like, from this point on, I don't really have a favorite band. But I have a band that kind of leads the way. And Chicago were that band. And they led to, basically, the good thing was they led to my discovery of jazz. What a lot of snobby people was actual jazz, not Chicago. But you got to remember where I was coming from. So it was kind of a big door opening for me. And sadly, I was big on Chicago until their fifth album. And the fifth album I can still listen to, and I can still say, there's a totally treacly pop song in there that's a million seller. And there's a song called "A Tune for Verez," which was almost edgy. And they were mellowing out a little bit. "We Can Make It Happen." That's pretty good. After that, I utterly lost interest. By then, I was on to bigger and better things, and which I'll probably cover in the next episode. Funnily enough, the Chicago stuff has not aged well for me. There's a video on my channel, look it up, where I do their 4-record live album, which got me millions of negative comments, which makes my heart sing. Because even when I was, how old was I, 12? When I bought that thing, of course, I got it for Christmas, 4 records in cardboard sleeves with no inner sleeves. And like, good luck finding one that isn't really scratched up just from little tiny scratches from being in those cardboard sleeves. And a booklet, one new song, which politically motivated song, which was not a very good song. They have apparently put out a box set of every note from that stand, which I can't imagine anybody wanting to listen to it. Apparently, according to Lee Lodenane of Chicago, the first night was really bad, and so apparently in order to present this box set as the complete Carnegie Hall tapes, they had to do a lot of tweezing on the first one, which is kind of funny. He thought it was funny. He sounds like a good guy. So, but you got to get the product. At any rate, after the 5th record, they turned into a schmaltz band. They met the dreaded David Foster, and it was over. Sadly, Terry Kath died in a really fucking stupid way, and naturally involving a handgun, which really made me hurt, because I liked the guy. I thought he was a great guitar player. I thought he wrote some great music. What a dumb way to go. And they really never recovered. They kind of turned into a soft rock band. And I can't tell you anything about any of their later records. They finally parted ways with Columbia. God knows how much money they must have made for them. And I don't know if they're even still going or not. One solo record, "Skinny Boy" by Robert Lamb, which I thought was amazing, considering this was the era where everybody did solo records. Not a bad record, "Skinny Boy." If you like his sort of melodic tendencies, but at any rate, after Chicago, then I started getting into things like fusion music, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and that sort of jazz. And we'll get to that later. I'll stop it here. So thanks for watching. We're going to cook up some more later. And going to watch these guys build these cabins in the wilderness, which I'm finding very therapeutic because I don't have to do it. Take care of each other. Don't forget to hit the subscribe, the like, all that stuff. Keeps me going. I know there's people that like to watch these, so it makes it worth doing. It's like having you all here with me. We'll talk to you later. Take care.